Good evening and good morning, everyone, globally. I know some people are joining from different parts of the world. My name is Kimberly KJ Haywood, and I have approximately over 25 years of experience in compliance, a combined skill set of cybersecurity, compliance, risk and compliance. I have been a tech leader in the industry for the last plus years. I'll not date myself. I've worked at and been a part of numerous different industries and sectors, from financial, healthcare, technology, and government. So I've worked in an array of different industries over the last 20 plus years. But I also have recently, with many of you, starting to immerse myself in artificial intelligence. But for me, my concentration has been artificial intelligence in governance and ethics, and ensuring there is a governance guardrails around ethical development and use of AI. Recently, I was selected to receive an honorary doctorate degree, specifically in ethics in business, for my work, my published work. I'm working on releasing a book very soon. Today is July 17th. So within the next, several weeks, hopefully you guys will see that on Amazon. So please check that out. One of my greatest fulfillments, and this is why I am very passionate about supporting EC Council University, is giving back to the cybersecurity community for professionals as well as those who are entering the workforce. My real interest and passion is making sure that you have a voice and making sure that you have a purpose and you know exactly what it is that you want to do and or at least learn in terms of across the different domains of cybersecurity. So with that, I want to start my presentation by kind of kicking it off with some key themes that we're going to highlight today. And one is our key themes is that first we're going to explore and we're going to define ethical hacking. That's the first thing we're going to start with. And we're going to talk about ethical hacking and its practices. But we're also going to talk about, we're talking about the definition, we're going to talk about the black hats, the white hats, kind of what's out there, what's the difference between a purple team, a red team, and a blue team. We're going to unpack GRC, talking about the backbones of secure enterprises. After that, we're then going to connect the dots on how ethical hacking reinforces GRC. So I'll walk you through a couple of short real-world scenarios, kind of some tips and tools that typically pen testers use, ethical hackers use for testing, and then we'll kind of wrap everything up and tie it up into a really nice bow about trends, key takeaways, and my little inspiration that I like to always add to that. So before I start, this is my disclaimer. EC Council Universities pushes the boundaries of all of their presenters, and I love that about the organization. So my disclaimer is I am not an ethical hacker, nor am I a pen tester. So my disclaimer is that we're going to concentrate on the importance of those two key roles in cybersecurity defense today. But I do encourage you to ask questions, provide your feedback and your insights, particularly if you're in those two domains. So again, I'm going to jump this off here, and we're going to start out with what is ethical hacking? Well, at least from KJ's lens, right? From my understanding is that ethical hackers are like white hat hackers. That's the other industry term, but it's more of an acronym. So ethical hackers being white hat hackers. You may hear that term if you're new to the industry. I'm a big fan of Marvel and DC, so I'm going to do some references around comic book characters. So if you're kind of geeky like me and you're really into cartoons or you're really into, comic books of the Marvel DC So series, that's going to be my reference today. So I like Tony Stark. He's one of my favorites. And why? Because technology, right? But what I consider a white hat hacker is they're like the Tony Starks of the Marvel, the whole, all of the Marvels. So they're brilliant technologists, right? Who can easily be vigilantes. But if they choose, that's only if they choose to. But instead, like Tony Stark, they use their deep understanding of systems and vulnerabilities to build a defense, not to kind of tear them down, right? So the key difference is the intent and the permission. So they don't break systems. I mean, they do break into systems, but they don't break into the systems without the permissions. So they're invited to simulate attacks and find flaws before the real enemies do. And like Tony Stark, the testing is the Iron Man suit. And by trying to overload its systems over and over. So ethical hackers, in that same vein, test your digital armor for cracks before anyone else can really exploit them. So my real world scenario example here is, and I need you guys to also do your research. So in 2022, there was the research found that a critical bug in Apple's Mac OS, it was the OS kernel, matter of fact, that allowed the root access. They responsibly disclosed it to Apple and earned a $100,000 bounty. Now, white hackers also can make money by doing that, by identifying exploits before they happen, right? Major system vulnerabilities before they happen, and actually gain financial reward for that. So it is like a bounty hunter, right? I'm going to go catch the bad guys and I'm going to receive a reward for it. That's the concept. So that vulnerability could have seriously caused, massive damage in the wrong hands. So what makes the hacking ethical? The consent. Again, it's the permission, the purpose, and all of that. Ethical hackers don't just think like hackers, right? Attackers. They think kind of ahead of them. And that's the brilliance of it. It's like, what will they possibly do? So on your slide, you see 3 key areas of a definition that I put together. Definition and intent, the type of ethical hackers, and why it matters. I'm going to focus on, because I know you guys all can read, but I'm going to focus on the latter, which is why it matters. With increasing threats, ethical hacking is critical for proactive defenses. It shifts the security approach from reactive to preventive. So that's going to be the theme today in this presentation, is prevention, prevention, prevention. So, and you'll have a copy of these slides as well, or the video. So let's go on to ethical practices, right? Best practices. So I'm a big proponent on red team, blue team, and purple teams, and I'll break that down to you and why and how that all ties into governance, risk, and compliance. So pen testing, as you can see on the slide, is basically the simulation of the attacks in real world scenarios, identifying vulnerabilities in systems, EHR, healthcare systems, financial records as well, and any other high concentration of sensitive data systems or anything else. The most important with pen testers is that they identify the key vulnerabilities that you want to mitigate, you can address, and it gives you the opportunity to do that. Also, there's a check and balance because there's access controls that are in place, and I mean system access control as well as governance access controls. So it basically provides that testing oversight, gives you a scoring of that, and then it allows risk and compliance, security professionals, anyone else in that particular team, security teams, right, including network security, it allows that team to work collectively to mitigate whatever those issues are that are identified through pen testing. It's a really good resource. So testing governance, it also bleeds into verifying that policies, like I mentioned, controls work as they're expected to work. So I'm giving you a quick example. So if you have a MFA, multi-factor authentication, that's required, does it apply consistently across the applications? That's a question. That's a question that a pen testing would be able to identify, yes or no. The risk reduction through vulnerability assessments, red teaming and penetration testing, they expose not just what's broken, but what's exploitable, and that is the key here. They support compliance from the perspective of validating the technical controls, not just the governance controls. So there's two levels of controls. There's your technical and there's your governance. Believe it or not, there's two levels. So that's during the audit phase, and you definitely want, so if you're an organization, or if you hear, again, if you're new to this industry, you're going to hear the word SOC reporting, right? Or you're going to hear SOX, SOC reporting, which is financial reporting. You're going to hear HIPAA reporting. Those are all actual audits that can be conducted in enterprises depending upon where you are. Healthcare has their own set of audits as well. So validating that data in transit, that it's encrypted and it's not just a checkbox. So the pen testing is not just that. I want to take it to another whole level and highlight the importance of red teaming and what red teaming and the difference between red teaming, blue teaming, and purple teaming. And so let's start with red team. They simulate real world cyber attacks, right? Phishing, privilege escalation, lateral movement that exposes all the vulnerabilities. That's their offense. The defense is the blue team. And the blue team, they monitor, they detect, they respond to those simulated threats using tools like a SIEM or endpoint protection or incident response playbooks and more, right? Every team and every enterprise is different. So red team is offense. Second team is the defense, offense, defense. I love football. So whether you're talking about soccer, football, or you're talking about American football, there's an offense and there's a defense. And then there's the collaboration, which is the purple team. And so the purple team blends those two for obvious reason, right? It's collaboration. So they're either a formal team or a structured process, so that the lessons learned from the red and the blue, all the tactics immediately form and improve the blue team's defenses. So it's a collaboration of those two and or the information that comes out of red teaming and blue teaming, and they put together that. So the term is now called purple team, which is the collaboration. Offense, defense, collaboration. So turning to the slide, you'll notice that it says pen testing, red teams. I'm going to do the impact. So I'm going to focus on the latter column here, which is impact on GRC. Finding the exercises, directly impacting reporting, helps prioritize remediation, and it does strengthen the incident's readiness for any enterprise, regardless of small, medium, or large. So that's really key. So those are the best practices in terms of ethical hacking that I view. So what's that mean in terms of understanding governance, risk, and compliance? Nobody wants to talk about GRC. I don't understand it. Why aren't there more GRC people out here? So I hope there are some governance, risk, and compliance people on this call that can really receive and this resonates with you. So GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, is truly often seen as the business layer of security. But you cannot implement governance, risk, and compliance without the security element to it. In reality, I view GRC as the architect that makes security operationals sustainable, and definitely it allows a better business flow. Again, oversight, guardrails, right? So sustainable and keeping everything flowing. and ensuring that compliance element throughout that process, meaning operationalizing your business overall. Governance ensures that security strategy does align, so there's an alignment with the business objectives, certainly, and also the technical objectives. There's business objectives overall for an enterprise, but there's also objectives within a business enterprise that has technical goals that they want to implement. So governance helps ensures that that strategy is, again, in alignment with the business objectives. So that includes leadership, accountability, policy creation, oversight. So I see it as, if it's not done, right, we're reacting, we're not being proactive. The risk management aspect, which is really super important, right, is identifying the threats and mitigating them before they really truly materialize. So this is where the risk register comes in, the vulnerability assessments, and the business impact analysis. Those key documentations, those key documents that are also a part of workflows and part of the strategic process of implementing risk management. You want to talk about risk registers. How do you ensure that you've captured all the risks within the enterprise? And what reporting do we have on that? And that includes pen testing, red team, blue team, right? That documentation helps manage the risk and manages the vulnerabilities and provides oversight for any type of mitigation that's occurring within the enterprise that's impacting the systems. So in a positive way, right? Risk mitigation. The compliance aspect deals with the laws, the frameworks, the standards. So some of those standards, obviously GRC, HIPAA, ISO 27001. In AI, we have EU AI Act, we have OWASP standards, we also have OWASP AI, so we also have NIST. So we have a whole host of frameworks in our technical ecosystem that we can lean on to support and help us navigate how we are going to ensure compliance from a security perspective, technical, and from a compliance perspective in terms of oversight. So we have the more than enough, and I say a plethora of frameworks out there and standards and guidelines that we have at our disposal. But ethical hackers validate whether the controls actually work. And that's the key with them. So they're not just written, right? It's not whether they're written down, it's the validation aspect of it. I think I mentioned healthcare in one of my earlier slides in terms of my introduction. So it's one of my personal passions is healthcare. So I'm going to imagine this. So from a GRC perspective, so roll with me in terms of my imagination. I see GRC as kind of the nervous system of cybersecurity. Ethical hackers provide the reflexes. So when you're about to touch a burning stove, it's the response, it's the reflex, right? It's the reflex. So GRC I see as that nervous system that allows your body to say, hey, I'm not supposed to touch that, right? And responding to the touch before it burns your hand. So it's that reaction. So you want to have that reaction. That's how I see it, right? I know I'm different. I recognize that. But the bottom line here is that governance, risk, and compliance has three key elements as it relates to really understanding GRC. And that validates your controls that you're working on within an enterprise. The risk identifies the real world threats, and especially through the red teaming and the blue teaming, using those as your offense and your defense. Compliance ensures the technical controls meet the regulatory frameworks, but it also compliance ensures that the organization is aligned appropriately with guardrails to ensure the safety and protection of data and intellectual property. So there's so much more to compliance, right? There's also privacy, which is very, very key. So we can't forget about that. So what on this slide am I really taking a look at here? What is GRC? We know we've broken that down. The core pillars explain, and I will highlight this: risk management, mitigation, and compliance, ensuring alignment, right? Why is it vital? And I think I talked about this, but one of the things I want to keenly highlight is that it's transparency and efficiency and accountability. Those are the key things I want to take away. TEA, 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 transparency, efficiency, and accountability. Those are the key in terms of managing systems, managing the IT and the security within an ecosystem. So particularly now with AI being basically a threat to many business enterprises, and I'm talking about malicious AI, right? So I want to make sure that we highlight those things. Remember those, TEA, right? Transparency, efficiency, and accountability. So let's move on to the next slide. It's all about the family. I'm a big believer. It's all about the family. We need a there is an African proverb that really speaks to the concept of having a community and a family be a part of raising one child, right? And it takes a community, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to support an elder. It takes a village. And the same concept of the protection of privacy and data and business enterprises, intellectual property, as well as PHI, PII, the protections that our responsibilities are as cybersecurity practitioners, as those who are entering the workforce in cybersecurity. I want to highlight the complementary objectives here, the audit and assurance compliance, and bridging the silos and what that really means. So I'm going to get started with something very unique here. So roll with me on this one. So I think that I'm going to get a little personal. So I think that the culture of an organization and how your teams think and act defines how security operates. You can have all the controls in the world, but if your culture doesn't tolerate, or it tolerates, I should say, at a high level, all these shortcuts, let's just do a checkbox type of thing. It punishes whistleblowers. There's a breakdown here in the system. So ethics and security isn't about theory, and this is my opinion. It's about behavior, the behavior that shapes the culture. And if your team is afraid to report mistakes and vulnerabilities, you have a cultural flaw, not just a technical flaw. So many times, and those of you who've been in this industry for many years know that sometimes it can be people with our own team that refuse to speak up because they're afraid to speak up. So they're afraid and they're not given that voice. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Giving you a voice, making sure that management, senior level managements, allow the ability for transparency. And that's important in terms of culture. So I want you to ask yourself, do you encourage responsible disclosure inside your organization if you're a leader? Do you employ employees and do you train them how to escalate ethical outcomes and concerns? Are security roles defined, or do people assume it's someone else's problem? I'll repeat that. Do you encourage responsible disclosure inside your organization? 2, do employees know how to escalate ethical concerns? And 3, are security roles clearly defined, or do people assume that it's someone else's problem? So I want you to think of ethics as an immune system in security culture. It doesn't just respond to threats, it prevents an unhealthy practice that could take root. So think of phishing simulations, ethical training, and yes, celebrating the white hackers, celebrating the wins, celebrating your pen testers, and embracing that even if they're external parties, and embracing, thank you very much. I really appreciate you pointing that out to us. We're definitely going to work on making sure that we mitigate these risks. Really appreciate it, because otherwise, right, you don't have a job because the enterprise is gone. So taking responsibility, right? Accountability. So the objectives here is the complementary objectives of hacking is aligned to GRCs by identifying the risk, ensuring policy reinforcement, and demonstrating the due diligence and safeguarding those assets. Audit assurance. Security audits benefit from ethical hackers by simulating those attacks, helping to validate the controls and the policies' effectiveness. And bridging the silos, which I think is really important as well, which is it encourages the collaboration. We talked about the purple team. It encourages the collaboration between the compliance team and the technical teams, even within your other business enterprises, human resources, ops, sales, product development. It encourages when there is bridging those silos for it to be like a holistic, like everyone's on board to ensure the protections of the organization's intellectual property as well as the enterprise, right? So it can continue to grow and foster. I believe those are critical points. So I want to compare something really quickly for you. Quick comparison. So ethical hacking, I grabbed this from the DBIR 2023. It's Verizon's report. So definitely you can go there. You should be able to see this report. But this is a 2023 report. So I'm only looking at 23, and 24, and I'll give you my lens into the future. So let's take the first area. So it has hacking, ethical hacking, and pen testing. So you notice that it kind of remains at the top tier, right? Through its contribution, but it decreases slightly here in 2024. So from 38% to 34%. Not much of an increase, but just a slight. But it's likely due to the adoption of complementary controls or complementary solutions and tools of why. So the idea of pen testing is that it highlights an organization's and it exposes the organization in terms of saying, hey, these are things that we need to work on. We talked about vulnerabilities, right? So it may be that 2024 is like, okay, yeah, we had some exposure, we noticed some things, but this is an overall poll for different enterprises. The fact is that look how critical ethical hacking and pen testing is for business enterprises. Super, super important. So the automated and monitoring aspect, those tools saw a noticeable increase. You see that in 2024. So this automation here, that tool from 22% to 26%, it shifted up, but it also shifts down, right? Which is a good, so it complements each other. The automated tool monitoring, you'll see on the chart, this goes down, this goes down. This goes up, automated tools goes up in 24, and this goes down. That's what we want to see. Third-party risk assessments, you'll notice that third-party risk assessment, they replaced with traditional external audits. They've climbed up from 12 to 13%, reflecting a growth complexity of vendor ecosystems, which has been the bane of many organizations' existence, but they're trying to work with their vendors. They're trying to ensure that their vendors are just as protected as they are within their business prizes, if not even more. So the human factor, and these are elements that I'm throwing in here, so you don't see that on the slide. The human factor is that it's now implicated that about 68% of breaches, reinforcing the importance of ongoing security awareness programs. So though this seems small on the scale, you notice in 2024 it slipped down just slightly. 2023 was up a little bit more, right? Just by a slight margin. And part of that is making sure that we have third-party risk assessments, making sure that that human error and that element is a part of this. Now, I'm not saying that vendors are a part of the human element, but just identifying, highlighting human element parts into security awareness. That's your front line in terms of your users, and that's also within the entire business process. So typically these security trainings, the challenge is getting your users who are non-technical users to get on board with what you're working on in terms of defense, right? Being defense, and also implementing your offense. So external audits here, you see that in 2024 went up just slightly. And then you'll also notice it was down in 2023. External audits. Now, my prediction is that we'll see external audits on a rise as it relates to our third-party vendors. That's just, again, my research is that we'll see this here rise up to, I'd say, right here in about the 16 to 20% percentile, because of AI now being a part of social engineering attacks, as well as other type of system attacks that AI is causing for many cybersecurity professionals and business enterprises. Policy enforcement and tools, engineering, social engineering needs to be considered, right? This policy enforcement, I also believe, in my opinion, in 2025, for the report, I believe this number is also going to increase, particularly around policy enforcement tools because of AI. Again, this is my professional opinion, but I think that what this slide tells us is that without pen testing and ethical hacking, white hat hackers, these breaches that were identified during those years could really go undetected for over 200 plus days. So we need to make sure that we're implementing those best practices around ethical hacking and pen testing, right? So that's really, really important. The patches are just patches. We need to do more than just that. We need to think outside the box. So my next slide, this is my favorite slide. I'm so excited and I'm almost done. So gray areas in the scope, compliance conflicts, and cultural resistance. So the gray areas in the scoping, I see it as ambiguous. It's around authorization, data access, and unintended consequences that do create legal and ethical gray zones for ethical hackers. Compliance conflicts is hacking simulations that may temporarily violate compliance norms such as uptime guarantees or data handling policies. So I'll come back to the cultural resistance because we talked a little bit about that in the previous slide about culture. So I'll come back to that. But what I do want to cover is that I love my analogies. So again, I'm a geek, so bear with me, audience. So okay, here we go. I think it gets really hot. I love this icon here where it's the red code. So, because it gets, in my opinion, it gets hot, it gets spicy here. So in real time, because ethical hacking isn't just about testing the code. It's about testing your entire security posture. I'm gonna break that down for you. So from a governance angle, ethical hackers validate whether your policies and actually hold up. We said that earlier, right? Or also, if they crumble the first time, they're retested. So you get that stress test through it. So risk management, they simulate the 5 fire scenarios, that fire, and I say 5, I meant live because I get excited about this. Just the live scenario simulations like phishing attacks and lateral movements and privilege escalation. They all expose the real true gaps. So they're not just theoretical, right? And the compliance aspect is they help confirm whether you're truly aligned with frameworks that I mentioned earlier in the slide, which is GDPR, NIST, HIPAA, ISO, and a whole host of other different frameworks out there. So it goes well beyond that checkbox. It goes really in the deep dive. So this is what I believe is my kicker here, is that remember that Verizon report that we just shared in the previous slide. So 2023, that same report, the organizations that embedded red teams into their strategy, and this is within that report, it showed that the red teams that embedded red teams into their security strategy, they saw a 35% drop in breach incidents. 35%. That's not just a huge win. That is proof that proactive defenses beats reactive cleanup, right? Red teaming, blue teaming, purple teaming, getting that full collaboration of that all in the family concept mitigates that whole gray area. But what's important here is the gray areas. If we go back, what if a bug bounty hunter stumbles into production of PII? It's a question for you. 2, what if a red teamer accesses HR files just to prove a point? And 3, these are just scenarios I'm throwing out. What if a pen test is so convincing that it triggers a real world business disruption? What happens then? What do we do? So going back to the slide, the cultural resistance, some organizations resist testing their defenses. And those 3 key mentions of those questions talks about that. Fearing exposure, reputational harm, and which undermines the productive risk management. So cultural resistance. So what's the upside to GRC? These areas. We mentioned them doing it, but the key takeaways I want to mention here for this slide, you guys can read this slide, is that ethical hackers reduce your mean time, your MTTD, your mean time to detect. They shrink your mean time in response, your MTTR. So it helps shrinks that. They pressure test your compliance frameworks. That's the beauty and the upside of GRC and ethical hacking, the blend of 2. So they most importantly trust internally, they empower teams. So again, we want to talk of proactive risk management, evidence of audits, and continuous process improvements. That's where we want to lead in this combination. So where are we going? AI-driven tools, I mentioned that earlier, stricter global regulations, expanding ethical roles, ethical hackers, involving strategies, policy influences. What's not on the slide is that I'll definitely embed that ethical hackers as well as pen testers are talking about, if not already starting to implement very unique strategies around AI and AI exploits. So AI red teaming is becoming a thing. So you'll hear more about that, right? So the key takeaways here today are integrating ethical hacking into GRC workflows, develop policies for responsible disclosure of AI testing, use ethical hacking to validate compliance and not just security, and strengthen security culture with proactive ethics. Please monitor and harden the AI supply chain. That's really, really important. There are some great managed service providers out there. They have great solutions and great tools. We want to keep them in our ecosystem, but we also want to make sure that those organizations are prepared to offer the services they're offered in a very well-defined security, right? Structure, that bubble of security and guardrails is around them, as well as compliance. So again, that's pretty much my key takeaways. That's it. My closing insight is that I just want to say that maturing GRC strategies need to move from reactive to proactive. I said our key theme is proactive, not reactive. Blend the human process, the culture, the processes, and the technology to drive the defense and offense teams so that we can kind of like be like the Justice League, if you guys follow, right? The Justice League. So your organization needs a hero. And I believe that our pen testers, our white hackers are a part of that ecosystem of the Justice League. They are also our heroes. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I want to say thank you very much for your time, and I hope you gained some insights today. I'm interested to see your feedback. Number one, policies. Number one, always policies. Always go with policies, because policies are your legal guidelines. Once they're implemented, it holds accountable your security team, whether it's your DevOps, your development teams, or whether it's your HR and your small enterprise. Even if you're 5 people in your business, policies and procedures are the very first thing you want, because they actually are tied to legal, meaning that these are our guidelines. This is how we're going to implement, and these are the processes in which we're going to use as our guidelines. So policies and procedures are the utmost, and that's where you definitely want to start. That is a really good question, and I really appreciate you asking that. What I would encourage is that the reports that come out of pen testing typically are handed over to CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, or your CTOs. So usually those enterprises, if they have one or the other, you're serving both roles, those reports, you want to ensure that if you are pen testing, you're an external, help, and this is twofold answer, help those organizations identify key areas that are pain points for the board, so that they can convey the message to the board, the importance to mitigate those risks. That's number one, because culture starts at the top down, and that's just a fact. As much as we have great employees in enterprises, the culture starts with the mindset of the leaders. So I would say doing that. Internally, if you have a report, you want to be as creative as you can to, again, if you are a leader and you have that report and your pen tester is gone and they're not supporting you in that aspect, but the report is solid, then it's about working with your internal teams. That includes internally HR, human resources, financial, your product development, your sales team, and having those internal conversations with them to get some insights from them of how do they see we can best present this so that we can mitigate the risk. Because at the end of the day, it affects everyone's bottom line if that contract is terminated due to the fact that you did not comply with the pen test and mitigate those risks. So I would definitely take those two approaches. If you're a pen test managed service provider, definitely help your clients go through that process. And if you're internal, definitely utilize the teams that you have to be your advocate, to have conversations with the board. No, the answer is money. The bottom line for many leaders at the top, whether they're senior leaders, and I'm talking about executive leaders, is their bottom line is, are we going to be able to grow without being stifled by governance? Are we going to be able to be productive and competitive in the marketplace without having governance and compliance and all the security stuff stifle us from our growth? So the bottom line is showing them the financial ROI, return on investment, of how important it is very, very instrumental. It's worked for me, is that I focus on their money. They want to make money. They want to be competitive. So I focus on what is your return on investment if you invest in these solutions and you invest in these tools, you invest in pen testing. Let me tell you how many more contracts we can get, because we're positioned ourselves where we can pass audits, which requires for Fortune 5s. Requirements for Fortune 100s, particularly if you're a managed service provider. So I would definitely look at the return on your investment concept, right? Because that's what you're speaking to them about. I hope that helps. Quick message is, no matter where you are in your career for cybersecurity or artificial intelligence or pen testing or hacking, just make sure that you educate yourself as much as you can, and make sure you educate others so that we create a great ecosystem of sharing knowledge, because that's going to be our biggest defense, is being a collaborative community.